It's Friday, July 15. In the headlines, work commences on the Morant Bay Urban Center. PAJ defends gender-based violence coverage. Regionally, Prime Minister Mia Mottley reduces tax on electricity in Barbados. And in sports, Reggae Girls lose to Canada. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I am Simone Absalom Gale. Work has started on the Morant Bay Urban Center in St. Thomas. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the center will serve the economic and civic purposes of the parish. Mr. Holness conducted a walkthrough of the site, accompanied by Member of Parliament for St. Thomas Western, James Robertson, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Factories Corporation of Jamaica, Mr. Littleton Shirley, and other stakeholders.
So within this center, you will also have the municipal authority. You will have facilities for a library. You will have the courthouses. You will have a park and proper parking spaces as well.
Mr. Holness says this development and the overall development plans for the parish is the first of its kind in recent history. He says the construction of the urban center will spur the interest of people.
If people realize that they can have good public service, good economic service, they have security, which this will provide, then why not choose to live close to this? And so you're going to find along the highway and in this proximity, housing developing. So the government is being catalytic and instrumental in trying to drive orderly and structured development.
The Morant Bay Urban Center is being built at a cost of $6 billion. The Prime Minister says it is being built all out of pocket.
The time that it takes, therefore, to get partners convinced of the feasibility and so forth, that takes a little time. And then to make the proper adjustments so that the persons who will eventually use it are satisfied, that takes a little time. And I want to say that in the development of the project, we didn't just sit together as FCJ and the government and say, this is how it will be done. All the partners who will purchase property here and use here, they were consulted in the design. And we have made several changes to the design to accommodate.
Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Factories Corporation of Jamaica, Mr. Littleton Shirley, says the construction will give way to 400 jobs.
After construction, we are anticipating up to 3,000 jobs for the facility. This is a 2-year construction period for construction. I'm sure, knowing the capabilities of China Harbour and the contractor themselves, they will try to do not only within time but before the scheduled time. We are hoping for that.
Despite the recent increase in toll rates for Highway 2000 East-West, the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, says it should be able to stay within the $194 million budget for toll payments. JUTC's Managing Director Paul Abrams responded to queries surrounding the matter at this week's Parliament's Public Administration and Appropriations Committee.
We might be able to balance it because we have less buses going through the toll. Again, if we were at the optional fleet, we would have major challenges, but because we have less units operating through the toll now, we may be able to balance and at least ride the storm out.
The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, in its bid to get more young people involved in agribusiness, has trained 700 youngsters through the expanded Rural Youth Economic Empowerment Program, managed by the Jamaica 4-H clubs. The Planning Institute of Jamaica's Economic and Social Survey Jamaica 2021 says participants received advanced training in business development and management, a startup grant of $50,000, and up to 6 months business coaching. The ministry has commenced providing access to arable lands for youth in agriculture. According to the survey, approximately 474.3 hectares of available lands are earmarked for eligible youths. During the year, the agro-parks supported 85 youth landowners on 128.6 hectares, and it is anticipated that the remaining hectares will be utilized under youth ownership. President of the Press Association of Jamaica, PAJ, George Davis, is defending how journalists report news regarding gender-based violence in Jamaica. Mr. Davis was speaking at the launch of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute recently released report titled Breaking News: Gender-Based Violence in Jamaican News Media at the PBCJ studio on Thursday.
The report says numerous news outlets do not have proper guidelines on how to report on gender-based violence, GBV. President of the Press Association of Jamaica, George Davis, was surprised to hear this information.
Starting to know that 50% of the media houses surveyed did not have policies on how to report on gender, GBV, and related matters. What I would say is that the study highlights just how difficult a journalist's job is in reporting on these things. And
Mr. Davis also notes from his years of expertise in the field of media, when it comes to gender-based violence reporting, there is a desire to meet public expectations while balancing the code and ethics of journalism.
As a practitioner, I can tell you that a lot of the ways in which the stories are crafted and the things that are put into the stories that would flag as problematic in a story like this reflect how the journalists anticipate, based on experience, the public wanting the story to be told, to give as much palatable detail as is possible. And you have to do that as a journalist. And the skill comes in not re-victimizing the victim, being fair and proper in your treatment of minors, and also treating the key actors in the key persons in the story with the kind of respect that prevents persons from knowing who the victim is by identifying who the alleged perpetrator is.
Head of the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at UWI, Dr. Karen Cooper, voiced her own discomfort regarding these demands and expectations from the public, which she believes are now archaic. She is now calling on the media to reinvent their narrative on how to cater for what she believes the public wants.
I'm a little concerned with the notion that the public, the consuming public, always wants a sensational. I'm concerned with the notion, and I'm not saying that's what George is saying today, but I certainly see it in the media reporting, that the more sensational, the better. The more we can stick with the gory details, the better. And there's a notion, I think, in the media houses, both print and broadcast media, that the public actually has an appetite for this kind of reporting. I would suggest that that is not an informed decision, and that if we look at our numbers of non-offending, even male persons in the country, 70% of men are never violent against women. So is that 70% also requiring a horror story when you report on someone's personal tragedy? I think the media needs to update itself on what the public wants.
In rebuttal, Mr. Davis combats this with his time spent in various roles in media by saying the public continually demands certain information.
People accuse you of withholding the details. Sir, how did you not say so and so and so and so? And especially in the case where if there's a high-profile Jamaican, high-profile individual involved in something like that, you will be told that, oh, so you and your friends down there are covering up for so-and-so because you don't want to say that that happened and that happened and that happened. I'm saying that it is a legitimate argument. And I know Karen says she's heard it over 20 years. Maybe you've been hearing it for 20 years. It has been recurring because it is true. I'm saying that people call newsrooms and demand to know why certain details have been omitted from our report, because they're saying we've heard elsewhere that so and so and so and so happened. You chose not to report it. There must be an agenda that you are in furtherance of an agenda why you have chosen not to report. And so again, this is part of what I've said. The way it is reported is to give as much without causing injury, without jeopardizing the police's investigation, without re-victimizing the victim, without passing sentence on the accused before they've had their day in court. It's a difficult thing to navigate all of that and remain on an even keel at the same time.
According to Capri, the report provides a situational analysis on the representation of GBV within media in Jamaica, with the aim of identifying the presence of gender-sensitive reporting as an approach to reporting on GBV on the island. Reporting for PBCJ News, I'm Raquel Robinson.
The public is being advised that a curfew has been imposed in the Whitfield Town community in Kingston 11 area. The curfew began at 6 p.m. Thursday and will remain in effect until 6 p.m. on Saturday, July 16. The boundaries for the curfew are as follows. North along Wellington Road from Waltham Park Road to Maxfield Avenue. South along Spanish Town Road from Maxfield Avenue to Waltham Park Road. East along Maxfield Avenue from Wellington Road to Spanish Town Road. West along Waltham Park Road from Spanish Town Road to Wellington Road. The police are advising that during the hours of the curfew, all persons within the boundaries of the curfew are required to remain within their premises unless otherwise authorized in writing by the ground commander. The Jamaica Defense Force will be conducting live firing exercise at the Green Bay Range in the parish of St. Catherine on Monday, July 18. The JDF is advising residents that there is no need to be alarmed by the presence of the soldiers during this exercise. However, every effort must be made to secure livestock during this period. Residents are also asked not to interfere with and/or move caution signs or flags. In the event that unexploded ordnances or paraphernalia are found, please report it to the JDF headquarters at telephone number 876-926-8121-9. In the business report, the IMF talks new fiscal policy, plus your regular market updates. Denita Rodney reports.
This should eventually allow adjusting the containment strategy to become more flexible and less restrictive.
Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Thursday, July 14, the US dollar sold for an average of $152.43. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $116.78. The pound sterling traded for $181.22, and the euro sold for an average of $153.32. The following reflects the movement of the JSE indices in Thursday's trading session. The JSE index advanced by 30 points to close at over 300,000 units. The junior market index advanced by 6 points to close at over 4,000 units. The combined market index advanced by 82 points to close at over 300,000 units. And the All Jamaican Composite Index advanced by 169 points to close at over 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 105 stocks, of which 40 advanced, 51 declined, and 14 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, 1834 Investments Limited, and Access Financial Services Limited. Stocks declined for Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited, Caribbean Cement Company Limited, and Caribbean Cream Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Variable Preference, CAC 2000 9.5% Cumulative Redeemable Preference Shares, and Community and Workers of Jamaica CCU Deferred Share. The following companies represent overall volume leaders: Dollar Financial Services Limited with over 3 million units, Jamaica Teas Limited, and Wigton Wind Farm Limited Ordinary Shares with over 1 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Clico Investment Fund was the volume leader with over 1,000 shares, followed by Calypso Macro Index Fund with 589 shares being traded. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, Epley Caribbean Property Fund Value Fund was the sole security trading over 11,000 shares. Oil prices rose despite not expecting a boost for Saudi oil and indications that the U.S. Central Bank could raise interest rates less aggressively than expected. Brent crude rose $1.77 to $100.87, and West Texas Intermediate crude rose $1.32 to $97.10 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In regional news, the government in Barbados has responded to the cries of Barbadians about high prices and the cost of living. Prime Minister Mia Mottley on Thursday, in a televised address to the country, announced a suite of measures to take effect shortly to ease the cost of living for all Barbadians, at least for the next 6 months. At the top of the list is a reduction in the value-added tax on electricity bills.
The reality is that the government has determined now that every Barbadian household should have the first 250 kilowatt hours removed from their from a VAT rate of 17.5% to a new VAT rate of 7.5%. This is going to represent on average a savings of about $17 to every Barbadian household, regardless of whether you use 250 kilowatt hours or not.
Customers should also see additional savings on approximately 44 items, which will be added to the basket of goods. It includes a selection of meats, sanitary items, canned and dry goods. Guyana is looking to introduce a reformed school curriculum to more schools. That's a word from Director of the National Center of Educational Resources, Quinita Walrond-Lewis. Walrond-Lewis was discussing the curriculum on the Education Ministry's Education Spotlight program.
We're no longer teaching for regurgitation of facts. We are looking for our learners to become critical and cognitive thinkers, for them to become doers of their education, creators of their education. So our renewed curriculum is firmly rooted in that framework. So it's not just here you go make it happen. It's we're with you every step of the way to prepare you to launch. And once you've launched out, we're with you every step of the way until you are comfortable enough to go it alone.
In Grenada, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell says he is committed to working for and on behalf of the Grenadian people, even if it means challenging the International Monetary Fund or World Bank.
Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell is moving ahead with his government's plans to create a better economic environment for the Grenadian people, even if it means stepping on the toes of the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank to meet the needs of the people.
The standard of living of our citizens are more important than meeting some commitment to the IMF. And I will quote Mia Mottley, we are here to service people, we are not here to service debt. So if I have to choose between servicing our people and servicing debt, the answer is obvious. We will service our people.
PM Mitchell said his administration's intent is not to bloat the government service, but instead to grow the economy, which they hope the private sector will take the lead.
Doesn't mean that we will bloat the government service. To the contrary, we want to grow the economy, and we feel strongly that the growing of the economy has to be done by the private sector. But that requires us as a government to invest in the areas where the private sector will be given the opportunity to grow, which means investing in education, investing in the digital economy, the blue economy, the creative economy, areas that will give our young people in particular the opportunity to become entrepreneurs, to become small business owners, to produce and make things. Because we accept that the government cannot absorb the hundreds of Grenadians who come out of school every year. There's a finite number to government jobs, and we need the private sector to step up. We need to encourage the private sector to step up, and we have to make sure that our policies encourage the private sector to step up.
While his government is yet to assess the public service, there are some concerns highlighted during briefings with staff relating to employment positions.
There are a number of obvious things that are clear. You have significant persons in acting positions. You have significant variances between established and non-established persons. You have significant variances between contracts for services and contract of services, when most times persons are doing exactly the same thing. And in many instances, it is a distinction without a difference. So what I've indicated to the senior managers of the public service, and in particular since I'm the minister responsible for the Department of Public Administration, is that we are going to have to devise ways in which we address and solve the challenges faced by this varying different terms and conditions of service.
He said issues such as this result in the implementation of a structural adjustment program.
So the reality is, if you incur debt and if you use the monies, particularly in non-productive sectors, then exactly what happened is what happened. You will then face a structural adjustment program. You will then have to increase taxes, and then the standard of living of our citizens are the ones who are going to be affected by it. So the size of the public service, or let me put it, the size of government workers, by whatever name you choose to call them, is the size. And that's the reality. And if you govern in such a way that you place the country in the hands of the IMF and the World Bank and all these multilateral institutions, who then come back and say to you, you need to cut the size of your public service. Well, that has been going on since the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. That is what they do. So we've inherited this situation. We need to address it and we need to fix it.
Staying with Grenada, Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell believes more can be done to encourage inter-Caribbean travel. He says inter-Caribbean travel should be an easy process and less costly, as we hear in this GBN report.
He gave an example of the effects of decreased inter-island traveling between Grenada and Trinidad and Tobago.
I think one of the things we struggle with a little now is that our air travel between Grenada, Tobago and Trinidad is not what it used to be. And that is something that we really need to improve, because it certainly in the case of Grenada, it has really stymied opportunities for Grenadians to travel to Trinidad and Tobago as frequently as we did in the past. But it's not Grenada, Tobago and Trinidad alone, it's even within the OECS. So it's one of the things that I'm really keen on trying to make sure that we can put some effort and emphasis in to allow our citizens to be able to travel freely and more efficiently and more cost effective amongst our islands.
The newly elected Prime Minister believes that more should be done by the OECS leaders to address this issue in order to improve traveling within the region.
I also genuinely feel that there has been a lack of political will to make travel amongst the islands and the OECS and CARICOM as seamless as we can. I really don't know that there's anything for Trinidadians to fear about Grenadians, or Grenadians to fear about Trinidadians or Tobagonians. And so it's difficult for me to understand why we still have a lot of the immigration restrictions that we have amongst ourselves, given our historical close ties, or cultural ties, or sporting ties, or family ties.
In news further afield, we look to the United States. The bodies of migrants who died last month in the back of a semi-trailer in Texas have begun arriving in Mexico. As families of the victims held a funeral procession, Mexico's president called for policy changes to prevent the tragedy from being repeated. Al Jazeera's Manuel Rapallo reports.
Cries of mourning for 3 migrant teenagers who died of excessive heat while crammed into the back of a semi-trailer in San Antonio, Texas last month. Their bodies arrived in the town of Marcos Atexquilapan in the early hours on Wednesday. Friends and family of the boys still devastated over their deaths.
We were close friends. We played on a soccer team, and well, the truth was they were sincerely very humble people, very hard workers, and fun to be around.
The boys were all cousins, and were among a total of 53 migrants who died in what has been described as one of the deadliest cases of human smuggling in recent memory. The mother of 2 of the victims, Yolanda Valencia, says her sons had dreams of finding a better life in the United States.
Ellos querían, pues, construirse una casa.
They wanted to build a house and start a business, not spend their lives making shoes, because it is tiring work. Here there is work, but it pays poorly. Things go up in price, but wages don't. That's why they went to look for a better life.
While an investigation into the tragedy continues, Mexico's president has renewed calls for policy changes to regulate the flow of migrants seeking work in the United States.
Instead of that relationship that perpetuates human rights violations, terrible accidents, and loss of human life, we should have a more orderly migratory flow through temporary work visas.
More than half of the victims have been identified as Mexican nationals. Others are from Honduras and Guatemala. More repatriation flights of bodies to their countries of origin are expected to continue in the coming days.
In sports, Reggae Girls found themselves on the losing end of Thursday's match against Canada. Jamaica took a 3-0 pounding as Canada secured their playoff match with reigning champs USA. The goals for Canada came from Jessie Fleming in the 18th minute, Alicia Chapman 64th, and Adriana Leon in the 74th. Alison Swaby from Jamaica spoke in the Flash Zone box and shared her thoughts on the match.
Yeah, I think that today we came out here believing that we could win this game, first of all, and I think you really saw it in the first half. We were tenacious, we had chances, and we weren't scared. And I think, obviously, they're a world-class team. They're Olympic gold medalists, and they punished us when we made mistakes, but I definitely think that we came out on the right foot, and it's just a game that we can build upon, and we knew that before we got here.
Swaby says that the team is already in prep mode for their third-place playoff.
I mean, the second we go in the locker room, we're focused on that match. Costa Rica feels like they become a little bit of a familiar opponent for us. We've seen them in World Cup qualifying and in the friendly recently, so I think that we're just going to try to use the momentum that we had from those previous games, the time that we've had together in this tournament to get that job done. And we know that there's a larger target of the Olympics, and we definitely think that we can achieve that.
Sharing her views on their match performance was Canada's captain, Alicia Chapman, who explained they expected more goals in this match.
I think we've played a lot of low blocks, and so it's been difficult sometimes to break down, but I think especially against Costa Rica, we got in our rhythm and we carried that over to Jamaica, and I thought the score could have been a lot higher. So I think we've been coming together really well as a group.
Looking ahead, Canada will face the U.S. in the final. What do you think the team has to focus on in the next 3 days?
Definitely still just working on connecting in the final third and keeping those clean sheets. I think that's what's most important.
World long jump champion Tajay Gale is unlikely to defend his title as the 18th staging of the World Athletics Championships gets underway in Eugene, Oregon. It's understood that Gale had a tough time during his practice session and is having difficulty sprinting. Speaking to the Jamaica Guyana in Oregon, coach Stephen Francis says, quote, "He is a young man and you have to convince him that he does not jeopardize a potential future for what he thinks is a gain now. But from what I could observe, he could not really sprint," end quote. Should Gale be unable to compete, national champion Wayne Pinnock will make his senior championship debut as the country's lone representative in Group A. The qualification round of the men's long jump will begin at 8 p.m. Jamaica time. 12 Jamaicans will take part in the opening day's competition activities. We wish them well. Captain Nicholas Puran has alluded to frustrating times for West Indies batsmen in the wake of the latest one-day international defeat to Bangladesh, but said his side would continue to work diligently to solve their batting crisis. The Caribbean side tasted their 10th defeat on the trot to the Tigers when they suffered a 9-wicket thrashing in the second ODI at Guyana National Stadium on Wednesday, the result coming on the heels of last Sunday's 6-wicket loss. In both games, West Indies batting proved abysmal with totals of 149 and 108, the latter their second lowest ever against Bangladesh. Puran conceded the period was a difficult one for the batting group, but backed them to remain focused on the solutions. Puran says, quote, "We're trying our best and eventually I hope we figure it out," end quote. And that's the weekend news on PBCJ. Remember to follow us on all our social media pages at PBC Jamaica. We are the People's Station.